COVID-19 pandemic has had a notable effect on the way we work, from the remote work environment to Zoom meetings and increasing demands for flexibility. But for some corporates, drawing people back to the office is essential and involves a new way of thinking when it comes to office space. From support spaces to respite rooms and cafes, spaces are being designed to be as flexible and adaptable as possible. Well, to talk more about the new work order, I'm joined by Professor LAN SNELL, Head of the Business School and Dean at the University of Southern Queensland. Professor, welcome. Great to have you back with us today. What is the new work order?
Well, the new work order is a new way of working and living and learning, and COVID has really brought this upon us, and it now asks us to re-examine the very definition of what is work. In your introduction, you mentioned how the office world has changed fundamentally. I mean, even before COVID hit, we saw the leading organisations, the global tech players, for example, trying to entice and retain talent via bean bags, vending machines, open spaces and collaboration. Well, COVID came along and everyone had to go home and, stay home in lockdowns, etc. What does that new workspace look like going forward? Well, I think the answer to that is anything goes. It's flexible. It is definitely hybrid. But when you come into the office, what do you actually do in the office? If you're coming into the office and sitting alone in your siloed space, tapping away at your computer, well, that's really not what we're wanting out of our workforce now anyway. So this is about team collaboration. So I do think it is a redefinition of the meaning of work itself. In addition to that, if I may add, there are three other elements that when we consider this new work order, these are characteristics including the creator economy. So we've had this sort of shift in, say, the gig economy, the sideline hustles, to now this whole thing about creating your own content. Content is king, and certainly now with the different platforms available, have TikTok, I can become my own influencer and run my own business. So creator economy is in full play right now. We're also seeing, reconceptualization from jobs of the future to jobs with the future. So we're talking about the future-proofing of yourself as a professional. And then finally, we're talking about the whole premium of learning as an attractor and retainer of talent.
So add into this conversation then, Professor, the actual engagement and communication and the different ways of doing that, whether or not you're working remotely or working from a new type of office space.
Yeah, and that's such an important aspect. What we've learnt most is that regular, frequent communication, be that by Zoom or other mechanisms or other tools, is crucial. What an interesting development that we've seen through our research is the importance of lived-in experience in that authentic communication. So it's not good enough for me to check in on my team as a leader by just asking inauthentic questions. How you going? I know it's hard, but to share my own vulnerability. And in doing so, that communication piece becomes a lot more relevant and it resonates more, and that point of communication and connectivity has a new dimension entirely.
So what should corporates be doing now to essentially future-proof, to use your own words, and to identify areas where they need to change?
Yeah, the common pain point across a lot of organisations, big or small, public or private, is how might I attract and retain talent through professional and continuous learning. If we are to accept the literature findings in terms of even Gen X being a 2-year switch or itch period, that I'm going to switch, why would I invest in my people if they're just going to go somewhere else? So the question is that I want to make sure that there is continuous growth there. So how might I do this? Some of the best practices that we're seeing from organisations is creating some sort of like a resource mapping hub area where we're going to look at each individual who's got that potential to grow within the organisation. Now, their current skill set may be redundant in the next 2-3 years because of automation and digital disruption. And so therefore, it's incumbent on us as an organisation to support their training and pivot them in other ways. So if we extend this conversation to other areas, even if we look at the broader resource sector and answering that big, hairy question of how might we sustain and develop a roadmap to pivot that to more renewable resources, this is what we're talking about. Reskilling and upskilling is a premium in this space.
Yeah, absolutely, and education as well obviously runs alongside that. All of these sort of change that corporates do need to take into account is going to come at a fairly significant cost, especially if you add into that the additional technology needs that are more often than not required. How do you convince then a corporate to make this spend when they can potentially run along as they are right now without making any changes?
Yeah, a key question. And I think a fairly obvious and easier answer to that is, and I'll turn that question around and ask them, I mean, what is the cost of not doing this? And that cost is losing your talent. And the cost of rehiring new talent on this is far greater than investing in your people. Investing in people always come out trumps.
Professor, it's as always a real pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Professor LAN SNELL with us there, Head of the Business School and Dean at the University of Southern Queensland.